Hello, my name is Kristen King, and this presentation is on fostering perseverance and countering learned helplessness in students with disabilities. This presentation will cover what learned helplessness is, how it relates to education, how perseverance affects students with disabilities, strategies for fostering perseverance, and the role of consistency and collaboration, common mistakes that are made, and finally, a call to action for all educators. Learned helplessness occurs when a person does not pursue, utilize, or acquire adaptive responses to challenging situations due to the belief that they are incapable of changing the outcome. The term learned helplessness was coined in the late 1960s when researchers discovered that animals could be conditioned to believe that their actions did not affect the outcome of an unpleasant situation. For example, when in a cage and presented with unpleasant stimuli, an animal could be conditioned to intentionally not attempt to escape, despite a clear opportunity, due to a perceived lack of control. Ultimately, perceived presence of control has been found to be the cause of this learned helplessness and dictates how people respond to unpleasant or challenging situations. More recently, the term learned helplessness has been applied in the educational setting. This occurs when students fail to show perseverance when presented with a challenging task or situation. This can manifest in many ways. For example, putting their head down on the desk, avoiding the task, and not completing the task at hand. Students with disabilities face even more challenges when compared to their typically developing peers. In order to qualify for special education services under IDEA, a formal evaluation must show that the student's disability, which must fall under one of the 13 categories listed in IDEA, affects their ability to make progress in school. While accommodations, modifications, and interventions help remove barriers to accessing the curriculum, these students still face added challenges. Perseverance is an important skill for all students and for all people, but it is especially important for educators to foster perseverance in students with disabilities. There are two reasons for this. One is that students with disabilities have an increased need for self-advocacy skills as they progress through their schooling experience. There are times when students will have to advocate for proper usage of their accommodations and modifications per their IEP. Outside of school, it's important for students with disabilities to understand and be able to advocate for their rights that are afforded to them through the Americans with Disabilities Act. This could look like advocating for their right for extended time or testing in a quiet location in college, or advocating for appropriate accommodations in the workplace. Self-advocacy can be difficult at times because it requires speaking up and articulating needs, so helping students know how to persevere through those difficult emotions will help them succeed in the long run. Additionally, students with disabilities face more challenges in school. These challenges can vary in severity and type based on disability category. A student who has a specific learning disability is going to have different challenges than a student who has autism spectrum disorder, which will be discussed later in the presentation. Research also shows that students with disabilities are more likely to face bullying. This is a challenging situation that requires students to confide in a trusted adult to receive the support they need. Without the confidence to ask for help, they may not receive the support they need to stop the bullying. It is critical that teachers address student needs on an individualized level because students with disabilities will respond to challenging situations in different ways. This example follows two students participating in a cooperative learning activity in an inclusion math classroom. Student A has a specific learning disability in mathematics calculation. When participating in the activity, a challenge this student may face is completing multi-digit multiplication. They need to know and apply the strategies to help them succeed in the task, such as using a multiplication chart to support calculations. Meanwhile, student B, who has autism spectrum disorder, faces social challenges. This includes appropriately engaging with peers, communicating ideas, and listening to different perspectives. Student A must use strategies to participate appropriately, such as using previously taught sentence starters to share ideas and pausing at appropriate times to listen to different perspectives. Additionally, advocating for a short break to regulate emotions before returning to the group would be an appropriate coping strategy. Both students must persevere to achieve success by knowing the appropriate problem-solving strategies to use in this situation. There are many evidence-based strategies that educators can use to foster perseverance and teach problem-solving skills to students with disabilities. The three strategies that will be covered today include the problem solver intervention, goal setting, and productive struggle activities. The first strategy is the problem solver intervention. This is an intervention that uses three stages for teaching problem solving to students. Perseverance is a learned behavior, so using behavior-based interventions is an effective way to teach the skill. This strategy first uses functional communication training to teach appropriate communicative responses that students can use when presented with the problem. This includes teaching students how to appropriately communicate when faced with a challenge. For example, this could involve teaching the students to ask for a break instead of yelling. The next step is to implement behavioral skill training, which involves instruction, modeling, rehearsal, and feedback to support the target behavior. This connects with best practices for students with disabilities by providing explicit instruction. This gives students the chance to rehearse and refine skills using feedback before practicing in real-life settings. The last step in this intervention is using a token economy to incentivize the target behavior. Whenever the student appropriately demonstrates the target behavior, such as appropriately using a problem-solving strategy, they earn a point to use on a predetermined menu to earn prizes. The next intervention is goal setting. Educators can help students set specific, timely, and actionable goals related to academics or behavior. This could be directly related to goals that are already stated in their IEP, but smaller goals directly related to classwork or a target behavior are also effective. IEP goals are determined by special education teachers and other stakeholders based on data. Having students take ownership over their learning and setting their own goals can increase engagement. Educators should provide consistent opportunities for students to reflect on the progress towards their goals. Ultimately, involving students in the goal-setting process increases engagement and makes students more likely to persevere when reaching those goals becomes challenging. When students achieve the goals that they have set for themselves, it increases their self-efficacy and confidence because they feel control over their learning, which is a critical factor in avoiding learned helplessness. The last strategy is productive struggle activities. Productive struggle activities are useful because it creates an opportunity for students to feel the uncomfortable emotions that accompany challenging problems in a safe and low-stakes environment. In this activity, the teacher would present a challenging task to a small group of students. After reading the task aloud and answering clarifying questions, the students would work on the problem for a short, predetermined amount of time without receiving help. After the time has passed, students have an opportunity to check in and ask intentional questions about the task. The steps are repeated until the task is solved. This is an effective intervention because it gives students the opportunity to practice feeling uncomfortable. However, These feelings are not exacerbated to the point of complete frustration due to the timed check-ins. The task is still achievable, and the students know that the uncomfortable feelings will not last forever. This gives them the opportunity to practice and receive feedback on their use of problem-solving strategies without feeling defeated or overwhelmed. When implementing these strategies and interventions to help students develop perseverance through the use of problem-solving skills, it is important for educators to collaborate and ensure that interventions are implemented consistently. When educators do so, it helps reduce student stress and anxiety since they know what to expect. Collaboration must happen between educators and parents to create consistent expectations at home and at school. Parents have valuable information about their child's academic and behavioral history that can help inform which interventions will be most successful. Additionally, they can employ similar problem-solving strategies at home with the student in everyday situations to encourage generalization of skills. Building perseverance and problem-solving skills can be difficult, and there are several mistakes that teachers commonly make. One mistake is using tasks that are too challenging. This can have the opposite effect and encourage learned helplessness because students aren't able to successfully use strategies to solve something when it is too challenging for them. Another common mistake is inconsistent application. Students need opportunities to practice and receive feedback. If they are simply given information, instead of using problem-solving skills, then they will not have the opportunity to develop these skills. If some teachers are encouraging problem-solving strategies and others are not, then it can cause delay in the generalization of these skills. The next mistake is ignoring the individual needs of students. This goes along with using tasks that are too challenging. If a teacher does not understand the needs of their students, then they are not going to be able to develop tasks that are appropriately challenging for them. The last mistake would be not using engaging activities. If students are not engaged in the task, then they're less likely to use problem-solving strategies. Teachers hold the responsibility of helping students develop content-specific academic skills. However, in order to provide a well-rounded education, they must go beyond pure academics to support the behavioral development of all students. Through academics, teachers can help students understand the control they hold over their own learning. Building perseverance and eliminating learned helplessness not only creates high expectations for all students, it also creates a more equitable learning environment for students with disabilities. Life outside of school presents many challenges, including applying for and holding a job, navigating peer relationships, and maintaining physical and emotional health. Students must be equipped with the tools to face these challenges with confidence. Perseverance gives students the tools they need to lead a meaningful and successful life.